everyone, Michelle here, and today I'm going to be going more in depth with Romanticism. This is what the students in person learned this week. So this is for students that are virtual or for students that did not attend class this week on Monday or Tuesday of this week. The first thing I want to go over is talking about a word, romanticize. So we've learned about Romanticism with our project, with our assignment that we did last week, and now I want to talk about what the word romanticize means. So this word connects to Romanticism because it's a breakdown of it. And it's to deal with or describe in an idealized or unrealistic fashion, make something seem better or more appealing than it actually is. So something that you can do, especially with words that you're not familiar with, is look up the definition, obviously, and then try to connect to things in your everyday. So that is what I did for you guys. I actually connected something in your guys' everyday that you might connect to. So I'm sure we've all been to McDonald's before, or even just seen a commercial or an advertisement or a billboard with the McDonald's Big Mac. And this is actually an excellent example of romanticizing or idealize something, making something better than what it actually is. Because every single time we see that Big Mac in person, it never looks as good as it does in that advertisement or the billboard or the commercial. And this is something that's actually really common in a lot of advertisements, is romanticizing and idealizing that product or whatever it is that they're trying to get you to eat or buy. So this is an excellent example of romanticizing, and as crazy as it is, we can connect it to these paintings that we're learning about in class. So I actually have one right here for you guys. Now I'm actually going to move into some new stuff. So we've talked about Romanticism a lot, and we understand that nature is really important to the Romantics, and we understand why now, because the Industrial Revolution. So now I want to talk about what exactly it is that they're painting and why it's important. So in Romanticism, landscapes became more than just a background. So what exactly does this mean? Previous art movements that we've talked about, a lot of times the landscaping and the nature isn't what's important in the paintings. It's just the background. But now these paintings, like for example this one, is the artwork, is the nature. The landscape is what is important now. And that's what we're focusing on in Romanticism. So, first things first, we need to talk about what a landscape is. And it's as simple as the depiction of a natural scenery. And when we're talking about specifically in artwork, in art. And then to do a little bit more of a review, Romanticism era, the values are intuition, emotion, imagination, and this has everything to do with the individual. In the paintings, we're looking at landscapes and wild animals, so everything to do with nature. The tone is subjective and spontaneous, so we'll talk about that as we're looking at these paintings. The colors are deep, rich shades, just something that we talked about in class a lot. And the technique is quick brush strokes, so you can connect that actually to how I provided that video of your guys' monochromatic gradation. So I actually have a student example right here. And I asked you guys to change the directions of your color pencil as you're coloring in, and we connect this to the movement of our brush as we're painting. So that's kind of interesting. And then our strong light source. So I wish I would have brought an example of a strong light source in here, but you'll see that in just a little bit with our strong light sources, meaning that when you look at this painting, you can immediately point out where the light is. It's very strong and overwhelming, and you can notice it very quickly. And that's what a strong light source is in a painting. And then we have shaded contrasts. So this is actually a review of the elements of art, elements and principles of art. And we'll find in the paintings that the contrast is a lot more over-exaggerated than you would see in real life. Okay, so contrast to review is the difference of elements. So you can compare and contrast any element of art and also so many different things in real life too. You can compare and contrast big and small, fat and skinny, lots of different things. Sorry, I was blanking for a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go through some different artists that are really important to the Romantic era that connect to what we're going to be doing in class. So my first painter that I'm going to talk about is J.M.W. Turner, James William Mallard Turner. And he is an English romantic painter and printmaker. And in his paintings, which I have an example right here too, oftentimes are imaginative landscapes, which is really important to Romanticism. It's both of those things, but imagination, violent marine paintings. So this is an excellent example of that, and I'm about to show you another one as well. Traveling experience. So a lot of times we're going to find that his paintings are of his experience while going to other places in the traveling aspect of them, like the sea. And then narratives. So narrative we can connect to if I were to choose on someone in class, if I was to pick on someone in class and say, you're going to be the narrator to read today. And what that would mean is that person is going to be reading the story. And that is exactly what narrative means, is telling a story. So I'd like for you to look at this painting. And this painting is titled Slave Ship, and it was painted in 1840. And this is an excellent example of JMW's work. People actually say that this is the best painting to describe all of his artwork, so it's really important to Romanticism in this artist. And this painting was actually based off of a narrative. So in the 18th century, it was a poem, and it described a slave ship that was caught in a typhoon or a storm in the sea. And it's about the true story of the Zong, a British ship, and the captain threw overboard dying and sick enslaved people, and then he collected the insurance money only to those available at sea. So he took advantage of these sick and dying slaves in order to get this insurance money. So it's a really interesting, deeper story. Yourself about, and a lot of the students in class and how I feel personally is it's very chaotic and it just feels emotional to me. And the most important part about this painting, I believe, is that this painting wouldn't look like this if we were here today. If we were to compare this painting to a photograph of this exact same spot to this day, it just wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't feel like this. We wouldn't have the same effect. And that's because this has everything to do with J.M.W. Turner's imagination, personal experience, and emotions. He's putting his emotions into this by over-exaggerating his brushstrokes and over-exaggerating the colors in the painting and the contrasts. And it just really brings out that emotional connection to JMW's individual experience as an artist. Then, you're not going to believe this. This is actually the same exact artist, but you can just compare these two paintings and it almost looks like it's a completely different person that's completing these. But this is the same artist. And I believe this is important because artists have the choice to include what kind of mood they're portraying and what kind of feeling they're wanting to give. This one just feels so much more calm in comparison to the other one. This is probably a better example of Romanticism because it's emphasizing that emotion, individual experience, and his imagination. This painting is a lot more straightforward and realistic, and it feels a lot more calm in my opinion too. It's a lot more static. And so we can compare those two paintings and understand how important emotion is to a painting and how it changes a painting too. And then I want to talk about a painter named John Constable. And he's actually a really well-known romanticist too, so I thought it was excellent to include. He is also from over in Europe, and a lot of times he was romanticizing or idealizing his everyday life. And so a lot of times this was idealizing the English countryside. So his every single day, what he was seeing as he was walking outside, he was making that more beautiful, making that more ideal, and using that in his paintings. And also he would include paintings of his travel as well too. So here's another example of John Constable, another painting of your everyday life. This is something we can connect to. We walk by and see buildings with trees too, even if we are hundreds of years after this painting was completed. But yeah, this is another awesome example painted by John Constable. And then I also wanted to include David Wilkie. He's a romantic painter, and his subject matter is genre scenes a lot of times. I'm just getting a little bit off topic, so I won't go too into it. But this means painting of everyday life of people, okay? But we're more focusing on nature, but David Wilkie also does that and also paints a lot of imagery of landscapes and tells stories too. So I thought this painting was really important to include. It is called Sheep Washing, and it was painted in 1817. And something I really want to emphasize is that just like those other paintings we just looked at, this painting wouldn't look like this if we were here today. And this is a really excellent example of a strong light source too. As you can see in the left area of this painting is that strong light source, which I'll kind of like point to it. It's kind of cool, I can do that. And yeah, that house wouldn't be as dark if it was daylight out. There's just a really strong contrast between light and dark in this painting. One of my students in class actually emphasized how the sheep really feel important and really stand out in this painting, which would make sense by the title, Sheep Washing. But I think this is really important that that student said that, because it emphasizes that an artist can make those choices to emphasize what they want. And that's something really important with Romanticism, is that they're starting to make these choices more. And now I'm actually getting into one of my most favorite painters named Albert Verstadt. And he is a German-American painter. He was an immigrant from Germany, and he traveled to America all across the western states. And so he went to Colorado, California, Nevada, and painted the beautiful scenery out in the western of America. And so a lot of times he is best known for his traveling experience over there. And so his paintings are about his individual traveling experiences. So this is an excellent example, painting the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Landers Peak. Albert Verstadt is an excellent example of romanticizing, because he includes all this gracious wildlife that may not have even been there whenever he saw this place. And Albert Verstadt is actually known to take imagery from his previous painted paintings and add it to his new paintings. So it's not plagiarizing or necessarily copying, because he's doing it off of his own paintings, so nothing's necessarily the matter with it, but it can be a little deceiving at the same time. This is an excellent example. Verstadt is known to change the scenery in his paintings and add the wildlife, add mountaintops even, and just change what he's actually seeing, and he's basing it off of other places in the United States too. So it's kind of a little bit deceiving, because what he would do is he would take these paintings, which I don't have one with me, he'd take these gorgeous paintings, like this one for example, and he brought it back to Europe and said, this is what America looks like, this is exactly what it feels like. And he romanticized America, and it made America seem more beautiful than what it actually was. Not saying that America's not beautiful, because it truly is, but he was a romanticist, so he was idealizing America in his paintings. So something I want you to think about is, what do these artists have in common? And I'll go ahead and I'll break it down. There's a lot of different ways that you can connect, but for me to break it down in two major points: individual experiences of romanticizing. So all these artists are including their travel experience, their everyday life, inspirations, emotions, imaginations. It all has to do with the individual experience. And then nature and beauty worship.